Hi, welcome back. Today I'd like to share a story, and I'll start with this. Sometimes the most ordinary opportunities lead to the most extraordinary outcomes. I think we all know this theoretically, but if you're in a moment of transition right now, maybe a moment where you're questioning your career and wondering what's next, or maybe you're stuck on a belief that you must make a certain type of move right now to stay relevant, or to make sure your career story sounds really good for future employers. Here's a story for you. It's my story, and I hope you enjoy it, and I hope it helps you think a bit more expansively about this moment that you're in right now. Many years ago, I took a job, one that I did not really want to take, but I really needed it. It was an entry-level role at a paint center of a car company called Tesla. This is when their stock was like $20 a share, and no one really knew if they were going to make it. Now, before you get all excited, know that I knew nothing about cars. I had zero interest in working in a tech company or a car company, and it was a contractor position. So technically, I was not even going to be working for Tesla. I had just completed my master's degree in counseling psychology not too long ago. And I was looking for work teaching psychology or working in administration at a school or a university. In this contract role at Tesla, I would be doing paint process analytics, basically data entry. It paid less than $30,000 a year. I had just spent 4 years building an emotional intelligence-based curriculum for middle schoolers, expanding an educational program at a learning center, and teaching social emotional learning courses. I was interviewing with community colleges and schools and learning centers. And all I was getting was an entry-level contractor role at this car company, with no guarantee of being hired by Tesla. But it came with health insurance and a stable paycheck, and I was going through a divorce, and nothing in my life made any sense, so I took the job. It was going to be the thing I did for a little while until I got my job in higher ed. That car company hired me full-time a few months later, and I got some stock options. And that company's stock at that time was $100 a share when I got the options. And then it blew up. And as you know, people who worked at Tesla at that time did very well financially. A few years later, I had enough money to buy a home in the Bay Area or take a few years off work and go travel the world. I didn't do any of that. I kept working. Tesla's brand was very attractive at that time, and it led to me getting several other really cool jobs at companies where I grew a career in HR, picking up new skills and experiences that would eventually become the foundation of my own coaching and consulting practice. 11 years after taking that entry-level role, I left my corporate career, and I started my coaching practice full-time. That entry-level, ordinary role where I threw on a paint suit every morning over my regular clothes and a hat and went and sat at a desk entering numbers that I didn't even understand in an Excel sheet. That role set me up for the next decade of a life that I couldn't have ever dreamt of. Before I go on, I just want to stick a little reminder in here that I didn't know any of that was going to happen. Back then, all I knew was I showed up to work at like 6 a.m. I had to throw on this paint suit. I went and sat in a paint center, working on a computer, entering numbers in a spreadsheet. It just didn't seem like, at the time, it was going to lead to anything bigger than that. So all these stories, right? All the stories that we hear on this podcast, all the stories that you hear in the world, they're great looking back. But I want you to think about what it might have been looking forward, because at that point in my life, I had no clue what was going to happen. All right, back to the story. So my role at Tesla led me to jobs at some of the coolest companies. It helped me get mentors who helped me at every step of the way. A great career in HR. It wasn't always fun, but it was great. A home in one of the most outrageously expensive housing markets in the US, opportunities to travel the world and meet very cool people, the chance to learn about various industries, and just do things that I never imagined I'd be doing. There was one role I took at Tesla in sales. It was very boring, and I did not like it, so I decided to start volunteering on the weekends at an educational nonprofit. I ended up volunteering with them for 8 years, and eventually that volunteer role is what led me to getting my first adjunct faculty teaching position in psychology at Laney College. Did I expect that when I was sitting in that paint center in that paint suit, entering numbers in Excel? No, I did not. Sometimes friends will ask me, they asked me this back then a lot. People don't really ask me this anymore, but sometimes people will ask me how I went from a career in education to a career in tech and found so much success. The truth is, at 27 years old, when many of my friends were trying to break into their first middle management position or eyeing that promotion and were really worried about what a specific career move would look like on a resume or on LinkedIn, and they didn't want to make any lateral moves and they really needed these titles, I chose to take an entry-level role at a company that I did not understand. I didn't negotiate. I didn't ask for a title. I didn't even know what the title of this role was going to be. I was simply grateful. I went into work every single day between 5 and 6 a.m. with the biggest smile on my face. I stayed some days until 9 p.m. Happily, I took an interest in my work, genuinely. I would practice Excel formulas and take courses to learn how to do work that I had no interest in doing long term. But I just really wanted to be good at my job. The company did not pay for that education. I did, because I wanted to be successful. And also because I was really naive and I didn't know that you could ask for learning and development funds. So I just took these courses and bought books and read. I was reading books on Excel, okay? Like, this was not a glamorous time of my life. But I did not complain. In fact, if I ever heard anybody else around me complain, I'd always be the first to offer a new perspective. I never thought of myself as better than anyone else. One day, they handed me a radio, like one of those walkie-talkie things. And I was now maintenance dispatch. When a machine in the paint center went down, I was one of the people responsible for calling maintenance and explaining the problem. I had no idea what this even meant. I didn't even know what machines were in the paint shop. I didn't know anything about the paint shop. I just sat in that office above the paint center, entering numbers in an Excel sheet. So later that day, I asked the maintenance manager if he could show me all of the machines in the paint center and explain the whole process of how the car gets painted. And he agreed. And he asked me to come in the next morning, an hour early, to walk the shop with him. And that morning, I remember I was like a kid in a candy store. I was so eagerly learning about how sealer worked and why it was important, and how many times the cars went through these robot cells, and why certain colors, when they were left on the car, it was labeled off-color dirt, and certain colors were just labeled dirt. I learned about which machines were older and broke down more often. I learned about the ovens and how often they were cleaned and why it was an important part of the process, how many coats went on the car. I learned about how the car body was moved from the paint shop, or from the body shop to the paint shop, and then from the paint shop down to general assembly, and why sometimes they were sent back and why that caused delays in the process. I learned so much that morning. And while Bob and I were doing this walkthrough, I was really eagerly taking notes and asking questions. And my manager noticed, and later on, he asked to talk to me. So he asked me what I was doing there so early that morning. And at this point, he rarely spoke to me. I was very new. And I said I wanted to understand how the shop works so I don't mess up my new maintenance dispatch job. And he laughed a little and then asked me to start coming to the morning meetings. From there, he became my mentor and my biggest advocate, and even saved me from that not-so-fun sales job that I ended up in eventually. When people ask me how I built my life over the next 11, 12, 13 years after that, all I can say is I was either really naive, overly confident, or extremely desperate. Because I genuinely did not care what everyone else was thinking about this girl with 2 degrees, one from a top public university, who was sitting in a paint center, in a paint suit, entering numbers on a computer, and getting yelled at by the engineering manager when she couldn't figure out which machine in the paint center was down because the radio was staticky. It wasn't until I left that job that my colleagues told me they were all so curious about me because I was apparently way overqualified for that role. This really surprised me. My manager even said years later, he said, "I have no idea why you took that job, Sarah. You had 2 degrees, one from UC Berkeley. You were bright and well-spoken and analytical and had great input. Anyone would have hired you." And I looked at this guy and said, "Dude, I needed health insurance, okay?" The thing is, I never thought I was overqualified. I learned more at that paint center about work, life, leadership, management, and business than I had ever learned earning any of my degrees. I was fascinated by the robots and the paint process. I was so intrigued by the way the production team and the engineers and the maintenance teams all worked together and didn't work together. The types of conflicts that would come up and how they'd get resolved. I was constantly learning from everyone else there. And I thought every single day I was the least qualified person in that shop. So if you're in a role that feels like it's not good enough for you right now, or you're in a difficult situation with work, or you're looking for a role and not really finding anything that, meets your standard or what you think is good for you or for how your career looks, I guess, I encourage you to expand your perspective a little bit. When someone tells me they're stuck in a job they don't like, I always wonder what incredible thing the universe is cooking up for them that they can't yet see. You see, every good thing that has happened in my life since I was 27, maybe almost every good thing, can be traced back to me taking a job that on paper I was apparently absurdly overqualified for. So when people ask me about how I built a successful career in tech and HR after working in education, all I can say is this. I was handed a lemon, and I squeezed every drop of juice out of it. I used the pulp and the rind and the peel, and I made every lemon dish I could think of. I also found ways to feed others with that one lemon, and then I took the seeds of that lemon and I planted lemon trees. So if you've been handed a lemon, I hope you surprise yourself with a life that you're able to grow from it. Thank you for listening.